Welcome. I'm going to be reading pages 52 through 62 of Harry Potter. So sit back and enjoy. If you notice my background changed is because this is a picture of Diagon Alley there's a Harry Potter world in Florida. And this is a picture of Diagon Alley in Florida. So while I'm reading Harry Potter being in Diagon Alley, you can picture him actually being in Diagon Alley with the background. Crikey, I'd like a dragon, said Hagrid. You'd like one? Wanted one ever since I was a kid. Here we go. They had reached the station. There was a train to London in 5 minutes' time. Hagrid, who didn't understand muggle money, as he called it, gave the notes to Harry so he could buy their tickets. People stared more than ever on the train. Hagrid took up 2 seats and sat knitting what looked like a canary yellow circus tent. Still got your letter, Harry? He asked as he counted stitches. Harry took the parchment envelope out of his pocket. Good, said Hagrid. There's a list there of everything you need. Harry unfolded a second piece of paper he hadn't noticed in the night before and read. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Uniform. First-year students will require 3 sets of plain work robes, black. 1 plain pointed hat, black, for day wear. 1 pair of protective gloves, dragon hide or similar. 1 winter cloak, black, silver fastenings. Please note that all pupils' clothes should carry name tags. Set books. All students should have a copy of each of the following. The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1, by Miranda Goshawk. A History of Magic, by Bathilda Bagshot. Magical Theory, by Adalbert Waffling. A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration, by Emeric Switch. 1,000 Magical Herbs and Fungi, by Filda Spore. Magical Drafts and Potions, by Arsenius Jigger. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, by Newt Scamander. The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection, by Quentin Trimble. Other equipment, 1 wand, 1 cauldron, pewter, standard size 2. A set of glass or crystal phials, 1 telescope, 1 set brass scales. Students may also bring owl or a cat or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. Can we buy all this in London? Harry wondered aloud. If you know where to go, said Hagrid. Harry had never been to London before. Although Hagrid seemed to know where he was going, he was obviously not used to getting there in an ordinary way. He got stuck in the ticket barrier on the Underground and complained loudly that the seats were too small and the trains were too slow. I don't know how muggles can manage without magic, he said, as they climbed a broken-down escalator which led up to the bustling road lined with shops. Hagrid was so huge that he parted the crowd easily. All Harry had to do was keep close behind him. They passed bookshops and music stores, hamburger bars and cinemas, but nowhere that looked as if you could sell a magic wand. This was just an ordinary street full of ordinary people. Could there really be piles of wizard gold buried miles beneath them? Were there really shops that sold spellbooks and broomsticks? Might this not all be some huge joke that the Dursleys had cooked up? If Harry hadn't known that the Dursleys had no sense of humor, he might have thought so. Yet somehow, even though everything Hagrid had told him so far was unbelievable, Harry couldn't help trusting him. This is it, said Hagrid, coming to a halt. The Leaky Cauldron. It's a famous place. It was a tiny, grubby-looking pub. If Hagrid hadn't pointed it out, Harry wouldn't have noticed it was there. The people hurrying by didn't glance at it. Their eyes slid from the big bookshop on one side to the record shop on the other, as if they couldn't see the Leaky Cauldron at all. In fact, Harry had the most peculiar feeling that only he and Hagrid could see it. Before he could mention this, Hagrid had steered him inside. For a famous place, it was very dark and shabby. A few old women were sitting in a corner, drinking tiny glasses of sherry. One of them was smoking a long pipe. A little man in a top hat was talking to the old barman, who was quite bald and looked like a gummy walnut. The low buzz of chatter stopped when they walked in. Everyone seemed to know Hagrid. They waved and smiled at him, and the barman reached for a glass, saying, "The usual, Hagrid?" "Can't, Tom. I'm on Hogwarts business," said Hagrid, clapping his great hand on Harry's shoulder and making Harry's knees buckle. "My goodness," said the barman, peering at Harry. Can this be?" The leaky cauldron had suddenly gone completely still and silent. "Bless my soul," whispered the old barman. "Harry Potter. What an honor." He hurried out from behind the bar, rushed towards Harry, and seized his hand, tears in his eyes. "Welcome back, Mr. Potter. Welcome back." Harry didn't know what to say. Everyone was looking at him. The old woman with the pipe was puffing on it without realizing it had gone out. Hagrid was beaming. Then there was a great scraping of chairs, and next moment Harry found himself shaking hands with everyone in the leaky cauldron. "Doris Crockford, Mr. Potter, I can't believe I'm meeting you at last. So proud, Mr. Potter. I'm just so proud. Always wanted to shake your hand. I'm all of a flutter. Delighted, Mr. Potter. Just can't tell you. Diggle's the name. Daedalus Diggle." "I've seen you before," said Harry, as Daedalus Diggle's top hat fell off in excitement. "You bowed to me once in a shop." "He remembers!" cried Daedalus Diggle, looking around at everyone. "Did you hear that? He remembers me!" Harry shook hands again and again. Doris Crockford kept coming back for more. A pale young man made his way forward, very nervously. One of his eyes was twitching. "Professor Quirrell," said Hagrid. "Harry, Professor Quirrell will be one of your teachers at Hogwarts." "Potter," stammered Professor Quirrell, grasping Harry's hand. "Can't tell you how pleased I am to meet you." "What sort of magic do you teach, Professor Quirrell?" Defense against the dark arts," muttered Professor Quirrell, as though he'd rather not think about it. "Not that you'll need it, Potter?" He laughed nervously. "You'll be getting all your equipment, I suppose. I've got to pick up a new book on vampires myself." He looked terrified at the very thought. But the others wouldn't let Professor Quirrell keep Harry to himself. It took almost 10 minutes to get away from them all. At last, Hagrid managed to make himself heard over the babble. "Must get on, lots to buy. Come on, Harry." Doris Crockford shook Harry's hand one last time, and Hagrid led them through the bar and out into a small walled courtyard, where there was nothing but a dustbin and a few weeds. Hagrid grinned at Harry. "Told you, didn't I? Told you was famous. Even Professor Quirrell was trembling to meet you. Mind you, he's usually trembling." "Is he always that nervous?" "Oh, yeah, poor bloke. Brilliant mind. He was fine while he was studying out of books, but then he took a year off to get some first-hand experience. They say he met vampires in the Black Forest, and there was a nasty bit of trouble with a hag. Never been the same since. Scared of the students, scared of his own subject. Now, where's me umbrella?" Vampires? Hags? Harry's head was swimming. Hagrid, meanwhile, was counting bricks in the wall above the dustbin. "3 up, 2 across," he muttered. "Right. Stand back, Harry." He tapped the wall 3 times with the point of his umbrella. The brick he had touched quivered. It wiggled. In the middle, a small hole appeared. It grew wider and wider. A second later, they were facing a large archway, large enough even for Hagrid, an archway onto the cobbled street, which twisted and turned out of sight. "Welcome," said Hagrid, "to Diagon Alley." He grinned at Harry's amazement. They stepped through the archway. Harry looked quickly over his shoulder and saw the archway shrink instantly back into a solid wall. The sun shone brightly on a stack of cauldrons outside the nearest shop. "Cauldrons, all sizes, copper, brass, pewter, silver, self-stirring, collapsible," said a sign hanging over them. "Yeah, you'll be needing one," said Hagrid, "but we gotta get your money first." Harry wished he had about 8 more eyes. He turned his head in every direction as they walked up the street, trying to look at everything at once. The shops, the things outside of them, the people doing their shopping. A plump woman outside the apothecary's was shaking her head as they passed, saying, "Dragon liver, 17 sickles an ounce. They're mad." A low, soft hooting sound came from a dark shop with a sign saying, "Ilops Owl Emporium. Tawny, Screech, Barn, Brown, and Snowy." Several boys about Harry's age had their nose pressed against a window with broomsticks in it. "Look," Harry heard one of them say, "the new Nimbus 2000, the fastest ever." There were shops selling robes, selling telescopes, and strange silver instruments Harry had never seen before. Windows stacked with barrels of bat spleens and eel's eyes, tottering piles of spell books, quills and rolls of parchment, potion bottles, globes of the moon. "Gringotts," said Hagrid. They reached a snowy white building which towered over the other little shops. Standing beside its burnished bronze doors, wearing a uniform of scarlet and gold, was Yeah, that's a goblin, said Hagrid quietly as they walked up the white stone steps toward him. The goblin was about a head shorter than Harry. He had a large, swarthy, clever face and a pointed beard, and, Harry noticed, very long fingers and feet. He bowed as they walked inside. Now they were facing a second pair of doors, silver this time, with words engraven upon them. Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. For those who take but do not earn their pay most dearly in their turn, must pay most dearly in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned, beware of finding more than treasure there. Like I said, ye'd be mad to try and rob it, said Hagrid. A pair of goblins bowed them through the silver doors, and they were in a vast marble hall. About 100 more goblins were sitting on high stools behind a long counter, scribbling in large ledgers, weighing coins on brass scales, examining precious stones through eyeglasses. There were too many doors to count leading off the hall, and yet more goblins were showing people in and out of these. Hagrid and Harry made for the counter. "Mornin'," said Hagrid to a free goblin. "We're come to take some money after Mr. Harry Potter's safe." "You have his key, sir?" "Got it in here somewhere," said Hagrid as he started emptying his pockets onto the counter, scattering a handful of moldy dog biscuits all over the goblin's book of numbers. The goblin wrinkled his nose. Harry watched the goblin on the right weighing a pile of rubies as big as glowing coals. "Got it," said Hagrid at last, holding up a tiny gold key. The goblin looked at it closely. "That seems to be in order." "And I've also got a letter here from Professor Dumbledore," said Hagrid importantly, throwing out his chest. "It's about the you-know-what in Vault 713. The goblin read the letter carefully. "Very well," he said, handing it back to Hagrid. "I will have someone take you down to both vaults. Griphook?" Griphook was yet another goblin. Once Hagrid had crammed all the dog biscuits back into his pockets, he and Harry followed Griphook towards one of the doors leading off the hall. "What's the you-know-what in Vault 713, Harry asked. "Can't tell you that," said Hagrid mysteriously. "Very secret. Hogwarts business. Dumbledore's trust me. More'n my job's worth to telling you that." Griphook held the door open for them. Harry, who had expected more marble, was surprised. They were in a narrow stone passageway lit with flaming torches. It sloped steeply downward, and there were little railway tracks on the floor. Griphook whistled, and a small cart came hurtling down the tracks towards them. They climbed in, Hagrid with some difficulty, and were off. At first they just hurtled through a maze of twisting passages. Harry tried to remember left, right, middle fork, right, left, but it was impossible. The rattling car seemed to know its own way because Griphook wasn't steering. Harry's eyes stung as the cold air rushed past them, but he kept them wide open. Once, he thought he saw a burst of fire at the end of a passage, and twisted around to see if it was a dragon, but it was too late. They plunged even deeper, passing an underground lake where huge stalactites and stalagmites grew from the ceiling and the floor. "I never know," Harry called to Hagrid over the noise of the cart. "What's the difference between a stalagmite and a stalactite?" "Stalagmite's got an M in it," said Hagrid, "and don't ask me questions just now. I think I'm going to be sick." He did look very green, and the cart stopped at last beside a small door in the passage wall. Hagrid got out and had to lean against the wall to stop his knees trembling. Griphook unlocked the door. A lot of green smoke came billowing out, and as it cleared, Harry gasped. Inside were mounds of gold coins, columns of silver, heaps of little bronze nuts. "All yours," smiled Hagrid. "All Harry's?" It was incredible. The Dursleys couldn't have known about this, or they'd have had it much faster than blinking. How often had they complained about how much Harry cost them to keep, and all the time there had been a small fortune belonging to him, buried deep under London. Hagrid helped pile some of it into a bag. "The gold ones are galleons," he explained. 17 silver sickles to a galleon, and 29 nuts to a sickle. It's easy enough. Right, that should be enough for a couple of terms. We'll keep the rest safe for you." He turned to Griphook. "Vault 713. Now, please. And can we go more slowly?" "One speed only," said Griphook. They were going even deeper now and gathering speed. The air became colder and colder as they hurtled around tight corners. They were rattling over an underground ravine, and Harry leaned over the side to see what was down at the dark bottom. But Hagrid groaned and pulled him back by the scruff of his neck. Vault 713 had no keyhole. "Stand back," said Griphook importantly. He stroked the door gently with one of his long fingers, and it simply melted away. "If anyone but a Gringotts goblin tried that, they'd be sucked through the door and trapped in there," said Griphook. "How often do you check to see if anyone's inside?" Harry asked. "About once every 10 years," said Griphook with a rather nasty grin. Something really extraordinary had to be inside of this top security vault, Harry was sure, and he leaned forward eagerly, expecting to see fabulous jewels at the very least, but at first he thought it was empty. Then he noticed a grubby little package wrapped up in brown paper lying on the floor. Hagrid packed it up and tucked it deep inside his coat. Harry longed to know what it was, but knew better than to ask. "Come on, back in this infernal cart, and don't talk to me on the way back. It's best if I keep my mouth shut," said Hagrid. One wild cart ride later, they stood blinking in the sunlight outside Gringotts. Harry didn't know where to run first now that he had a bag full of money. He didn't have to know how many galleons to a pound to know that he was holding more money than he'd ever had in his whole life. More money than the Dudleys had ever had. "Might as well get your uniform," said Hagrid, nodding towards Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. "Listen, Harry, would you mind if I slipped off for a pick-me-up in the Leaky Cauldron? I hate them Gringotts carts." He did still look a bit sick, so Harry entered Madame Malkin's shop alone and feeling nervous. Madame Malkin was a squat, smiling witch dressed all in mauve. "Hogwarts, dear," she said, when Harry started to speak. "Got the lot here. Another young man just being fitted up now, in fact." In the back of the shop, a boy with a pale, pointed face was standing on a footstool, while a second witch pinned up his long black robes. Madame Malkin stood Harry on a stool next to him, slipped a long robe over his head, and began to pin it to the right length. "Hullo," said the boy. "Hogwarts, too?" "Yes," said Harry. "My father's next door buying my books, and my mother's up the street looking at wands," said the boy. He had a bored, drawling voice. "Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully father into getting me one, and I'll smuggle it in somehow." Harry was strongly reminded of Dudley. "Have you got your own broom?" the boy went on. "No," said Harry. "Play Quidditch at all?" "No," Harry said again, wondering what on earth Quidditch could be. "I do. Father says it's a crime if I'm not picked to play for my house, and I must say I agree. Know what house you'll be in yet?" "No," said Harry, feeling more stupid by the minute. "Well, no one really knows until they get there, do they? But I know I'll be in Slytherin. All our family have been. Imagine being Hufflepuff. I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" Said Harry, wishing he could say something a bit more interesting. "I say, look at that man," said the boy suddenly, nodding towards the front window. Hagrid was standing there, grinning at Harry and pointing at 2 large ice creams to show he couldn't come in. "That's Hagrid," said Harry, pleased to know something the boy didn't. "He works at Hogwarts." "Oh," said the boy. "I've heard of him. He's sort of a servant, isn't he?" "He's the gamekeeper." Oops, I dropped my book. "He's the gamekeeper," said Harry. He was liking the boy less and less every second. "Yes, exactly. I heard he's some sort of savage. Lives in a hut in the school grounds and every now and again gets drunk, tries to do magic, and ends up setting fire to his bed." "I think he's brilliant," said Harry coldly. "Do you?" said the boy with a slight sneer. "Why is he with you? Where are your parents?" "They're dead," said Harry shortly. He didn't feel much like going into the matter with this boy. "Ah, sorry," said the other, not sounding sorry at all. "But they were our kind, weren't they? They were a witch and a wizard, if that's what you mean. I really don't think they should let the other sort in. Do you? They're just not the same. They've never been brought up to our ways. Some of them have never even heard of Hogwarts until they get the letter. Imagine. I think they should keep it in the old wizarding families. What's your surname, anyway?" But before Harry could answer, Madame Malkin said, "That's you done, my dear," and Harry, not sorry for an excuse to stop talking to the boy, hopped down from the footstool. "Well, I'll see you at Hogwarts, I suppose," said the drawling boy. Harry was rather quiet as he ate ice cream. Hagrid had brought him chocolate and raspberry with chopped nuts. "What's up?" said Hagrid. "Nothing," Harry lied. They stopped to buy parchment and quills. Harry cheered up a bit when he found a bottle of ink that changed color as you wrote. When they had left the shop, he said, "Hagrid, what's Quidditch?" "Blimey, Harry, I keep forgetting how little you know, not knowing about Quidditch." "Don't make me feel worse," said Harry. He told Hagrid about the pale boy and Madame Malkin's, And he said people from Muggle families shouldn't even be allowed in. You're not from a Muggle family. If he'd known who you were, he's grown up knowing your name if his parents are wizarding folk. You saw him in the Leaky Cauldron. Anyway, what does he know about it? Some of the best I ever saw were ones with only magic in them. A long line of Muggles. Look at your mum. Look at what she had for a sister. So what is Quidditch? It's our sport. Wizard sport. It's like football, but in the air. Everyone follows Quidditch. Played up in the air on broomsticks, and there's 4 balls. Sorta hard to explain the rules. And where are Slytherin and Hufflepuff? And what are Slytherin and Hufflepuff? Schoolhouses. There's 4. Everyone says Hufflepuff are a lot of old duffers, but I bet I'm in Hufflepuff, said Harry gloomily. Better Hufflepuff than Slytherin, said Hagrid darkly. There's not a single witch or wizard in the world who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin. You know who was one. You know who was at Hogwarts? Yes, and years ago, said Hagrid. Thank you for listening.